Welcome back to another video. I'm your host, Rising Oblivion. Today, guys, we're going to be talking a little bit about the PC port of Persona 5 Strikers and a little bit of the Switch port. So there's been some recent news, some recent things about people talking about how bad this game can run sometimes on a PC, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Being a person who is in the community, I've heard a lot of my friends talk about how bad the PC port can be. Apparently there's been some graphical issues, some crashes, some bugs, low frame rates, some just textures not loading in right, or textures just looking bad just because that's sort of just how the game is ported and stuff. So I wanted to dive in that a little bit here. And to preface the video before we start, this is not me hating on this at all. Keep in mind, if this game is on PC, you know, a lot of times PC games do get frequent updates. It's not very hard to patch a game if it's just digitally, so keep in mind this all is subject to change. This is stuff that we hope in the future ATLUS will, patch out of the game, hopefully, so keep that in mind as we go forward with this. But this is supposed to be a little bit of a recap in case you might be wanting to get this game on PC. You can understand a little bit more about the game through this. So let's just start off by talking about what the game technically is on PC and on Switch. They're technically ports. So the game was originally developed and created for the PS4. It is actually ported to Switch. It's ported to PC. So you should expect them to not run 100% the best because they are technically ports. The Switch obviously having a lower power capability, so it's going to run a little bit worse on there. But PC is a little bit of a different issue because it's trying to run the game differently. It's being ported over to PC. So I wanted to talk a little bit about certain settings and certain things about the PC version that can actually hinder your experience. And the first thing I want to talk about first is the anti-aliasing. Because this game is on PC, it's technically blown up a little bit, and you have anti-aliasing to help you not see those rougher edges, which is why Ryuji's hair has like a big black outline. Haru's dress has the big, edgy outlines on that. Anti-aliasing is supposed to help you with that, but the anti-aliasing in this game actually is not that good. Persona 5 Strikers actually has some pretty poor anti-aliasing when it comes to actually trying to help smooth out rough edges. And if you're playing this on PC, it's definitely blown out a lot more, similar to how Persona 4 Golden was, but that game was such an old game. Those models, I guess you could say, are smoother, but even though they're rendered less, these are 1080p models. From what I've heard, playing the game in 1440p actually does look a little bit nicer, but you can actually see the rough edges a little bit more because of that. And the game is stuck at 60 frames, which is another issue in terms of actually being able to see the rough edges. If something is running more smoothly, you don't end up seeing rough edges as much. So a lot of people graphically think this game can look kind of bad on PC, and it actually makes sense because of the poor anti-aliasing and the rough edges. Not only to mention, it's a fast-paced fighting game. If you have it on Switch, you're only seeing it at 30 frames, but it's a smaller screen, so it's not as bad. That is why something on PC might actually end up looking a little bit worse because you're seeing it so blown up. You're able to see the imperfections, sort of speak, I guess you could say. And with the game not running at a higher frame rate, really, if you're playing this on PC, it's not massively different compared to playing it on the PS4. That's why a lot of people right now are complaining about the PC version, and you know what? Rightfully so. I will give them that because the PC version should run a little bit better, but it's stuck at a 60 FPS, which is basically just what console has. There's almost no difference, really. And the 8GB of RAM storage is what they had recommended for this game. I've heard a lot of people on other sites and other people explaining that how having more than 8 is actually even better for this, so maybe the 8GB wasn't, enough, but I think a lot of that has to do with the game being so early and not having any patches for it. I thought this was going to be a little bit different. I thought this was going to be more of a Persona 4 Golden type of port, but really, it's not maybe done as well as we had thought originally. And the fact that you can use the controller does help this out a little bit, but really, when you're playing this game on PC, you're really just playing a ported game that's just trying to run on different hardware. And that's another point I wanted to bring out as well. A lot of people in my chat said, how does it run? Is it, a little bit faster? Does it load faster? Is it better? Does it look nicer? Well, when it comes down to it, PCs are all built differently. So depending on your specific PC, this game is going to run completely differently. If you have a hard drive, if you have an SSD, if your SSD is using a SATA cable, or if your SSD is being actually plugged in straight to the motherboard. I don't know if plugged in is the right word for that, but whether or not it's being directly actually incorporated into the motherboard, it all really makes a difference in terms of speed, really. If you have a PlayStation 5 and you're running it on that, you really shouldn't have to worry about load times. It's probably, if not, going to be better than certain PCs that have came out the past couple of years, or hardware that's came out for PCs the past couple of years. So if you're playing this on a PS5 or PS4 Pro, you're not honestly going to see a enormous amount of difference. Unless your PC has an SSD, then you could be beating out the PS4, but this game overall shouldn't be too intensive. It shouldn't be too hard, but from what I've heard, the average PC that people are playing with right now, this game actually loads a little bit slower than something a PS4 Pro or a PS5 would. So that's another thing to think about when buying this game on PC. Just because you have it on a PC doesn't mean it's going to run faster. The hardware is what matters here when it comes to actually running on a PC. And running the game on 4K 60 FPS is going to be out of what the recommended or the minimum specs for the game actually are. So technically, if you're trying to run this thing at 4K, you're going to need a better graphics card than what the recommended or the general, stuff for it are, the minimum requirements for it on PC are. And to only run that, not at 30 frames, but at 60 frames, you're going to have a decent graphics card in order to do something like that. That's, a big load for the game to have to carry, which is why I've seen certain people complaining about this thing running in 4K, which it does make sense. You would think the recommended would be enough for 4K, but it's actually not. That's just for 1080p, so you're actually going to have a beefier, rig to sort of run something like that. From what I heard, the sweet spot is 1440p, so if you're trying to run this thing at, more than 1080p, 1440p, not too bad. Keep in mind, like I said, the anti-aliasing is a little bit bad. The jagged edges are still pretty much there. So that's all the graphic stuff that I'd like to talk about. Now let's move over to frame rate. So frame rate issues have also been a thing here, not only with just gameplay, but actually the animations in the game have some sort of pre-rendered cutscene FPS issues, which I think should be some really easy stuff that ATLUS could patch out in the future. A lot of that probably has to deal with graphics cards, different graphics cards and stuff like that. When you're making a game for the PS4, guess what? There's only one, maybe two different types of graphics cards depending on your PS4 model. So they have a really easy job trying to make their game be able to run on that. So when you're playing it on a PC that's not close to what the PS4's graphics cards are, you might end up seeing some frame rate issues when it comes to, it trying to render something like that, because your graphics card isn't something they've maybe tested the game on exactly. So that is why you might see some frame rate issues. So we have graphical issues, potential frame rate issues that hopefully, like I said, ATLUS ends up patching those out in the future, finds ways, maybe to help the frame rate issues there out a little bit. But the real question is, what do we do about the loading and crashing? So loading and crashing has to do with something completely different than frame rates or just the GPU. It really has to do with the CPU and the game trying to run itself, which most new games have these types of issues, but the PC has had a much harder issue compared to some of the other things. So Switch, from what I've seen, and a lot of the Switch players actually got the Steelbook on Switch, which is, good on you, good on you. I'm, unfortunately, still waiting for my Steelbook for my PS4. I'm waiting till Tuesday, just like the, rest of you out there who are suffering while waiting. But the Switch didn't have many crashes. So when we're comparing all three platforms, PS4, Switch, PC, it almost looks like the PC, if anything, is the worst option. And I hate to say that. And I don't want people to have to refund the game. It's on Steam. You can technically refund it after a certain amount of time. But it looks like the PC version almost might be worse. You're having graphical issues. You're having bugs. People's games are crashing. You're having frame rate issues, not only with just gameplay, but the actual animations in the game. It's locked at 60 FPS. Why would it be locked at 60 FPS? Maybe a turn-based game being locked at FPS, frame rate, at 60. Okay, that kind of makes sense. A turn-based game, not really a big deal. But a fast-paced, fighting game, it makes sense to let that be unlimited frame rate. It doesn't quite make sense to have that be locked at 60, but due to all the other issues we've seen here with anti-aliasing and the, compatibility with other graphics cards, it makes sense why they maybe didn't want you to have, the capability to go over 60 frames per second. This might be why we don't have that. Hopefully in the future, they fix these bugs, they work on these types of things, and they give us, that unlimited frame rate, hopefully down the road when the game is actually able to run smoothly on 60. I guess that might be why they're trying to, do stuff like this. Maybe jumping over 60 FPS is something that they've never really done before. I mean, we pretty much know that. The only thing we have really is them trying to push the games onto, PS5 and stuff, which is technically running it better, and I don't really know if you can try to increase the frame rate on those games. So they probably haven't done a lot of text, actual full-on testing with bringing up the frame rate for their games. So Yeah, it's kind of hard to say here for the PC version. The Switch port, yes, it does look worse. It's running at 30 frames, but it actually works. So you kind of have to pick your poison here. Do you want the game to, yes, run better technically at times on PC, but it crashes and it has the bugs and you're blowing it up so you actually see more imperfections of the game? Or do you go with having it on the Switch, which is, running it a little bit worse, or the PS4, which is, honestly, I think the PS4 is probably, in my opinion, the best way to go with this. It's running at 60 frames and it's running well. That's basically the best route you can really go with here. So if you're a person who is wanting to buy Strikers, I would fully recommend buying it on the PS4. I think that is the route to go for. Sorry, this video was a little bit of a ramble, but I wanted to get this out here because so many people have been talking about this game on PC and a little bit here and there on Switch. So the Switch is good. You have the mobility. Frame rate's a little bit worse. Maybe it doesn't look as nice. PC has a lot of unknown issues, and whether or not ATLUS is going to touch on these issues, something we're going to have to see out in the future. Hopefully they do. An unlimited frame rate, having it just not be buggy at 60 would be nice, but the PS4 seems to be the best route to really go with here. So please like, comment, subscribe for more content in the future. Click the bell to be notified whenever I make a new video or when I go live. So this video was a bit of a ramble. Want to get that out here to you guys. That's why it's just talking, no music and stuff in the background. But this is just a quick cut for basically why maybe the PC version isn't the best. I didn't really write a script for this. I sort of just went off the top of my head. So sorry if this is a little bit long, but I had a lot of comments on my last live stream talking about this, and I really wanted to cover it. But thank you for, listening to me ramble a little bit here. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.